allowing me to really present on a very important issue, which is considered an epidemic in this country and a pandemic worldwide. So thank you so much for being here. We want to get started because we have an hour, and I really want to make sure we allocate the 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. I'm hoping that there will be questions as we go through the slides. So just a little content warning. I just want to make sure everybody knows that this webinar content may be disturbing. We'll be discussing domestic violence, including traumatic brain injury, repetitive head impacts, non-concussive head impacts, subclinical TBI, and progressive neurodegenerative diseases like chronic traumatic encephalopathy as they impact women, men, children, and youth. So I advise you to please practice self-care and give yourself space. Some of the learning objectives we have for today is for you to be able to describe what subclinical TBI is linked to CTE and other progressive neurodegenerative diseases among the domestic violence population. Recognize the differences between non-concussive head impacts and concussions, which is an important distinction to make. Recite what happens to the brain impacted by chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And I'm going to stop saying that. It's CTE for shorter abbreviation. Summarize the 4 pathology stages of CTE, how it's currently being diagnosed in postmortem. Explain how CTE and symptoms impact daily living. Recite current brain science, treatment, and prognosis for CTE, and describe why the DV population is high risk for subclinical TBI and chronic traumatic encephalopathy and other progressive neurodegenerative diseases. So lots of discussion about right here, the brain and what happens to our brain when it's traumatized. And just a little bit of historical background on science and brain science. It's important for this discussion that we're having. So it really is historically biomedical and medicine research in the overall medical system plays unique roles in really shaping how we look at health to date. And so the models we have, and the models have historically been used, are the white male model. So the white male model is now used as the norm for everything. And it creates challenges when you're talking about a different population, like specifically women, children, and youth. And we're going to get a little into that. So I just wanted to present that perspective. And again, just a little bit about these biases. They've evolved in the following ways: structural racism and discrimination in healthcare, a situation where guidelines based on a study of one sex, race, ethnicity, etc., like the white male norm, is then generalized to other populations. So negatively impacts disease detection, treatment, and outcomes in women, marginalized groups, children, and others. So it's really important for you all to be aware of that as we're going to get into this discussion about CTE and the domestic violence population. So health, medicine, and brain science may be fundamentally flawed because there is an ongoing failure of research tools, treatment, et cetera, that includes sex, racial, and other individuals' differences in studying, design, and analysis. And I just want to pause a little bit here just to build on the first webinar that we presented, which is the traumatic brain injury and the domestic violence population. And just want to remind folks that this is a very near and dear issue to me. And what we're going to be discussing today and getting more into is really the reason why I decided to go public with my story. And my mother, again, is the first public case of chronic traumatic encephalopathy that went public that is linked to domestic violence, and also the most severe case of CTE to date among NFL players and football players and professional players in the military. So I just wanted to give that little perspective. So what is chronic traumatic encephalopathy? It's a big word, and I'm sure most of you may have heard it on television if any of you are fanatics of sports, particularly in the NFL. So lots of people think it's often referred as a disease of professional boxers. Professional boxers because it was found in 1928 among professional boxers, with different terminology being used for it. And then in the National Football League, or the NFL, it was discovered in 2005 among the football players. So we hear a lot about it when NFL players get diagnosed with it. And I think the one that I see getting a lot of attention, there's actually, I think, a docuseries about him right now, is Aaron Hernandez. So he's just gets a lot of coverage about this issue. He was a very young player with stage 3, I believe, diagnosed CTE when he passed away. So chronic traumatic encephalopathy and non-concussive head impacts. Non-concussive head impacts are linked to chronic traumatic encephalopathy. They are under the threshold of a concussion, and this is something we covered in the first webinar. So if you missed it somehow, and if you have the chance, I know you're all busy, we're all really busy, but if you have an opportunity to view it, and if you want to get a little bit more information on traumatic brain injury and the types of traumatic brain injury there are, it will be a good review. But this is under the threshold of a concussion. There are no immediate, acute, or primary symptoms, unlike concussions or mild TBI. They can cause subclinical TBI or silent TBI, which are asymptomatic. They're a risk factor for concussion. Potential causes of non-concussive head impacts. You're thinking, what can cause a non-concussive impact? You don't even feel that you've had any symptoms, right? So it's a head acceleration event, or events such as being pushed, slapped, pulled, or shoved unexpectedly, minor jolts, etc., during domestic violence episodes. That's just some examples. There could be a lot more, but those are just some examples. Bumping into something or someone. Most tackles in football, headers in soccer. So you see the soccer player right there that I have an image of, her head hitting the soccer ball. That is a non-concussive head impact. Checks in hockey, collisions in basketball, and bumps to the head during falls. And I just want to pause here because this language is continually being finessed because it's being researched, and it's coming out of Dr. Ann McKee and Boston University CTE Center, along with Dr. Chris Nowinski and a lot of other wonderful individuals that are really trailblazing this arena, trying to figure out, what they're trying to figure out is what kind of head impact begins the cascade of these progressive neurodegenerative diseases. And the research is very convincing that this is really linked to not just CTE, and we're going to get a little bit into that, but other progressive neurodegenerative diseases. So you are getting the latest language. I just was speaking to Dr. Chris Nowinski and Boston University to make sure I have the most current language that they're using. And head acceleration events is fairly new. So just wanted to make sure that you got that information. And just a little bit of history, because we're talking about the domestic violence population, and we're talking about chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And I want to point out when we first found out about CTE, which was known as punch drunk syndrome, in 1928. We knew about the first case for domestic violence. The first written case is in 1990, and it was among a wife of a boxer that the doctors noticed that half of her head or brain looked like cottage cheese. So they went ahead and did this analysis in pathology, neuropathology. So then we have in 1937, the language is changing to 1949, which became CTE. The National Football League recognized CTE in a football player, Mike Webster, in 2005. Then the National Institute of Health recognized repeated head trauma causes CTE. We have the Unite Brain Bank that opened up in 2008, shortly after 2005. Then 2011, the first military war veteran is diagnosed with CTE, and they opened up a brain bank in 2012. Now let's go to the domestic violence population, which is far larger in proportions, right? There have been no brain banks, no treatments, no clinical studies allocated to this population, no biomarker studies, no education and awareness campaigns. So I just wanted you to see the stark difference. and why this is considered a silent and unrecognized epidemic. There are some myths also that I think keep the population thinking that CTE doesn't really impact them in general, specifically the domestic violence population. So one of the myths is that it only happens to athletes. That is not true. Anybody who's had or experienced any type of repetitive head hits is at risk for CTE and other progressive neurodegenerative diseases. A single non-concussive head impact or concussion can cause CTE. This is not what the research is supporting. It's supporting that it's repetitive head impacts over time, not a single concussion at all. So just be mindful of that. Repetitive head impacts inevitably lead to CTE. The research is not pointing to that at all. It's just saying that you're at risk, but not everybody that experiences repetitive head impacts will develop CTE or other progressive neurodegenerative diseases. A normal brain scan rules out CTE. At this point, there is nothing that is available that can detect that there is a CTE. A CTE has started to progress in your brain. Everyone who plays contact sports will develop CTE. And again, the reality is that while repetitive head impacts increase the risk, not everyone who plays contact sports will develop CTE. And they know this because when they've done neuropathology exams of football players who've had a history of repetitive head impacts, they've seen that they don't have CTE. They haven't shown through symptoms. So there's a lot of lots of room for growth in the brain science field. All symptoms are automatically attributed to CTE. Many symptoms like headaches, memory issues, or mood swings can have other causes. So we have to be really careful. Unrelated to CTA. So proper medical evaluation is really critical. So repetitive brain injuries, not everyone, again, who has had a concussive and a repetitive head impact or concussion develops CTE. It's really important for you to know that, because I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, I've had some repetitive head impact, so I'm at risk. That doesn't mean that, just not everybody. So changes in the brain, though, can begin. This is what I think is the reason why it's difficult to detect this, because the changes to the brain can begin months, years, or even decades. So think about decades, 10 years, 20 years after the last head impact, and why it's so important for behavioral health and other fields to really start looking at this issue. Because then we get confused as to what was the onset of some of these symptoms that we're going to talk about. So chronic traumatic encephalopathy, it is considered a brain disorder that is not yet well understood by brain scientists. Brain science do not fully understand all the causes of CTE. There's still a lot of discussion about, is it just repetitive head impacts? Is it concussions too? So lots of things. What else? Predisposition for, progressive neurodegenerative diseases, genetics, lots of things. Sex differences, women are more susceptible to traumatic brain injuries, and it takes us longer to recover. So lots of things that we need to look at. Recently, brain science found that CTE has a unique pattern of abnormal tau buildup, entailing tau misfolding and tau tangles. So the misfolding of tau becomes really important. I just want to go through it really quickly, and if I go too fast, just let Max know. He'll let me know. But it is the initial state of CTE where the tau protein starts to lose its normal shape due to various factors like, again, being hit in the head repetitive times. This misfold tau proteins can then begin to spread to other nearby neurons, initiating a chain reaction of misfolding. Once proteins start misfolding, even without additional trauma, and this is what's really scary, that once they start misfolding and there is no more trauma, they can cause other tau proteins within the same cell to misfold and malfunction. Tau tangles are aggregated clumps or misfolded tau proteins that accumulate inside neurons, which then disrupt their function and then eventually lead to their death, impairing internal scaffolding, impacting communication between neurons, and then causing really widespread damage in the brain. As tau tangles accumulate, neurons become increasingly dysfunctional and eventually die off, leading to this damage and these symptoms that we're going to talk about in the stages, the pathology stages of CTE. they're still trying to understand, the scientists are trying to understand why Tau misfolds and Tau tangles lead to ST in some people and not others, right? So there's an opportunity to then develop treatments. Scientists believe that the slow spread of Tau misfolding is likely one reason it takes so long for symptoms to show up years later, like we were saying, even decades later. Scientists are hopeful that the slow spread of the Tau misfolding provides an opportunity to effectively treat, slow down, or stop the CTE disease from progressing. So that's why it's important to look at this issue of misfolding and Tau tangles. And just, I wanted to point this out because this is something that happened in my case, and it was extremely difficult for me to navigate this issue. But chronic traumatic encephalopathy, most people don't realize, the general public don't realize that it is routinely confused for Alzheimer's. And I think we need to be really careful about that, especially if you have if you're seeing individuals that perhaps are challenged with some memory issues and you think that they have progressive neurodegenerative diseases, there's a really high chance that they're being misdiagnosed. So historically, it was believed that CTE and Alzheimer's disease Tau tangles were made in the same way. Today, CTE is often confused and misdiagnosed for AD. It is important to understand the differences as DV-CT victims and survivors are routinely misdiagnosed by neurologists, and that's what happened to my mother's case. So behavioral health providers can help advocate and support DV-CT victims and survivors in their quest to seek proper and needed care. You really can advocate for them because you have to really know the difference in symptomatology to really insist that, you know what, there might be something else going on in the situation. And the reason, obviously, you would like to advocate is because you want the individual to get the proper care and the proper treatment. CTE and Alzheimer's disease have a large number of Tau tangles too. Both share various similarities with regards to Tau deposits in nerve cells. The fold of the abnormal Tau protein in CT is different than the Tau fold in AD. The Tau tangles in the CT brain is also contain an unidentified element that is not present in Alzheimer's disease. So the scientists have made some progress to say, but you can only tell postmortem, you know, that this is not it. So it's very challenging to look at all this stuff and really differentiate between CT and Alzheimer's. There are a little bit of differences. CT symptoms usually appear in a person's 40s, so much younger. Alzheimer's symptoms usually appear in a person's 60s, unless it's a genetic type of Alzheimer's disease, and it shows up much earlier, usually like 30s, 40s, and 50s. Early symptoms of CT are often related to judgment, reasoning, impulse control, and aggression, while Alzheimer's disease typically begins with memory problems. So I hope that gives you a little bit of some differentiation between these two issues. So the normal brain versus a CT impacted brain, you can look at the normal brain and you could see what happens to a CT brain. So like my mom's brain was like shriveled up, and that's how they described her. It was just really, really tiny. CTE pathology stages and symptoms. It's got 4 stages, and CTE has its own disease progression. So we're going to get a little bit into that. 4 stages, like we shared. So this is the first 3 stages. Stage 1, a lot of it is asymptomatic, like we shared. It takes months, years to decades for symptoms to start showing up. So you're not feeling symptoms. But some of the stage 1 symptoms that Dr. Ann McKee have noted is headaches and or migraines, difficulty concentrating, difficulty with attention, and nausea, mild short-term memory deficits, and mild depression. My mother had immense migraines. I don't remember my mom not having a migraine. And we're going to get a little bit into sharing with you what else I saw in my mother. Stage 2, if you're declared that you had stage 2 CT postmortem, then you've suffered from the symptoms of stage 1, then short-term memory loss, mood and behavior challenges start to appear, behavioral outbursts or explosive moods begin to show up, and then there's more severe depression. Stage 3, we have, again, the stage 1 and stage 2 symptomatology, but then we have a sharp decline in cognitive deficits begin, memory impairments, executive function decline, visual spatial dysfunction, apathy. Visual spatial is something we noted in my mom quite drastically, and became drastic quite quickly. So then we have stage 4, which is a more severe pathology stage. So there is profound memory loss, severe vestibular system dysfunction, suicidality, profound memory loss, psychotic symptoms, including paranoia, severe executive function problems, severe language difficulties, uncontrollable rage. And this is something I just want to make sure that you understand. Uncontrollable rage. My mother exhibited this too. She was a very calm individual, and all of a sudden there was this rage that we just had never seen in her. Paranoia, substance use disorder, motor deficits. And there's a little bit more that I want to get into. There's also the Parkinsonism symptoms, which it's really just a term that refers to brain conditions that cause slow movements, rigidity, and tremors. So you'll see a gait difference, the shuffling the steps, posture instability, freezing, rigidity. The mask face that my mom developed eventually, just the mask face was, as a daughter, seeing your mother like that was a very, very, very sad for me to see that. Then we have the whole dementia symptoms. And as you may know, dementia is not a single disease. It is an umbrella term for used for individuals' changes in memory, thinking, and reasoning. And it's for really a decline in mental ability, severe enough to interfere with daily living. Disorders just grouped under the general term dementia are caused by abnormal brain changes. They just trigger a decline in thinking skills, also known as cognitive abilities, severe enough to impair daily life and the independent function. They also affect behavior, feelings, and relationships. And we also know that it's caused by CTE and Alzheimer's disease and other kinds of things that happen to individuals that have a history of this. So repetitive head impacts and dementia. Multiple epidemiological studies have found that experiencing repetitive subclinical TBI in early or mild life is associated with an increased risk of dementia in late life. Repetitive subclinical TBI increases the risk of dementia by 70%. People who are experiencing repetitive subclinical TBI in early life to middle age are about 2 to 4 times more at risk of developing dementia in life. This risk appears to increase with the number of subclinical TBI sustained. So again, these repetitive head impacts that are in non-concussive. So that's why I'm putting the subclinical piece in there so you understand that it's under the threshold of TBIs that show no symptoms. The risk of dementia remains elevated for decades after the injury. So these repetitive head impacts are also found to be correlated or linked or associated to Lewy bodies dementia, Parkinson's disease, and ALS. So lots of impact to our brains, and specifically these progressive neurodegenerative diseases. And in my mother's case, she had 2. And you find that a lot in individuals who've had repetitive head impacts and a history of TBI as well, that they have not just one type of progressive neurodegenerative disease, but other ones, combination. And of course, we need to talk about comorbidities. We talked about all the other progressive neurodegenerative diseases, but there's other types of things that we just need to be really aware of, like depression, PTSD, the substance use disorder. You know, just because you have CTE doesn't mean you're more prone to use substance use disorders, or you have experience, with substance abuse disorders. It also can come from you feeling out of control of what your body normally has done, you know, and now you're really changed. So now you're looking to self-medicate. Lots of people are misdiagnosed with these kinds of issues and symptoms. So people look for ways to really alleviate these symptomatology that is so devastating and impacts our daily living. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my mother and her symptoms. So the ones that I shared with you from the beginning that just stood out to me historically, and the reason I insisted with her neurologist that it wasn't only Alzheimer's that she had. I remember her having profuse, just profound, severe migraine headaches, just at a very young age, I think at her early 30s. And so my mother just had these horrific migraine headaches that would cause her to just have nausea and just unable to function. And if any of you have seen the population that you serve, the children and adults that have experienced migraines, they're pretty disruptive to your life. She had significant memory loss. The other thing we noticed in her was these crying spells that just were unusual for her. Just crying for no reason at all. Language difficulties, she was having a hard time finding words, remembering what words to say. That was something that we noticed in her. And I think I shared a little bit about, she was a very calm and loving person, but then became these aggressive tendencies that she had that were just not her normal self. I think the piece that I noticed, one symptom that I noticed when we took her on a trip, I noticed her steps were off. So her gait was a huge change at her. So her gait changed, but there was other visual spatial difficulties that she was having. But the gait is the one that told me my mom is now at a really bad stage. Profound executive dysfunction, apathy, obviously the dementia, anxiety, the depression also, but I wasn't sure if the depression was because she was feeling a loss of herself. And she would tell me, my brain doesn't work anymore. It doesn't help me. She just got really sad. Or was it the depression she had ongoing because of the chronic stress that she was feeling in a marriage consumed with domestic violence? So these are the kinds of things that I think researchers struggle with. And I think behavioral health, we can look at and say, what is it, right? It could be a combination, as we know. Parkinsonism that I shared, she had a masked face. My mom was very expressive and just was very loving. You could see it in her face, and all of a sudden she had a face that just was a mask. There was no emotion, or nothing came through that face, and other kinds of symptoms that we saw in her. On to the next. So why are domestic violence victims of higher risk? And again, we talked about the prevalence rates in TBI in webinar 1. But I just want to share with you that for TBI, we have prevalence data among some cohorts of the domestic violence population, but not all. So it's still an emerging field. We don't have, that I know of right now, any research really focused on repetitive head impacts in the domestic violence population. So when you hear a presentation about traumatic brain injury, and I've heard some, they don't talk about repetitive head impacts, and they don't really get into the progressive neurodegenerative diseases. And when you don't do that, then you really are not looking at the entire picture. And for me, this is the reason I went public, because of what I found out happened to my mother. So victims of domestic violence often suffer as months, years, and decades. Like my mother suffered over 40 years of traumatic brain injury and domestic violence in her home. So traumatic brain injury and repetitive head impacts as a result of being abused during domestic violence episodes. Sustaining just a lot of repetitive brain injury during the domestic violence episodes. It's not unique to my mother. I know other individuals have gone through the same thing. Brain injury sustained during DV episodes include non-concussive repetitive head impacts, concussions, and other types of mild TBI, as well as moderate to severe TBI. And most women, children, and men who are suffering these kinds of traumas to the brain are not getting screened or care. And I just wanted to pause here for a little bit and share with you that as I was trying to get an accurate diagnosis of my mother, I was working with Mayo Clinic to develop a clinic on traumatic brain injury in the domestic violence population, which would not just focus on one cohort, but everybody who is at risk, which includes children, youth, men with abusive histories like my father, and women. I was asked if I would consider going public with my mother's story because we were going to follow her in real time to really raise awareness of the silent epidemic in the United States, and then really have a call to action. And I have historically never spoken about what was happening in my family, but so this decision was very difficult to reach, but I felt very compelled because I saw the field, the behavior health field, the entire spectrum of the system of care, not aware of this issue. So if you're not getting the training, if you don't have the knowledge, then when you're seeing an adult in the populations you serve, you don't know what's going on. So you're not diagnosing or screening for it, so then they can be referred to receive proper care. So I was approached about this documentary to do it. And so the backstory is my mother's case, and it is called This Is Home. It's a film by Sydney Scotia. She is a director and she's a filmmaker. And I know that Max has been wonderful and provided you with the link to the trailer, and also in the handout of information, it's there. I would advise you, if you're going to watch it, I want to warn you that it is disturbing. The content is it's a very graphic documentary, but it does bring in all the brain researchers, leaders, trailblazers talking about why this is so important for us to look at. So if you're going to watch it, I encourage you to watch it with somebody, but I just wanted to highlight what the documentary is all about. So sharing really quickly. So my mother's brain, I was asked 3 times by 3 different entities to donate my mom's brain. And I was approached, and we had lots of discussions, and this is what why it was requested. The field of brain scientists were very concerned when they realized that the domestic violence population, of course, is at risk for repetitive head trauma and traumatic brain injuries, right? Had they ignored a significant part of the population, the professional sports population is very critical, and the military population is very critical. But you have a vast majority of the population that's being ignored. So they sought my mom's brain because they wanted to establish the connection between DV, brain injury, and CTE. The first case that came out in 1990 just didn't have enough information that they wanted. So with the now, the just new resources and brain science, they wanted to look at my mother's brain more in depth. I think the other piece that they were concerned about in traditional domestic violence cases is that you don't have a historian. So a lot of the individuals that want to, get legal recourse, it's difficult to really ascertain what happened and who caused the injuries. In my case, the eldest of 7 children, I was my mother's protector and also nursed her many times throughout the 40 years of abuse. So I witnessed what happened. They had a witness that could detail the type of trauma my mom experienced. And then, I work in the field of domestic violence and other social services issues. So I'm very, very versed on the domestic violence field and the history of it here in this country, as well as other parts of the world, the implications for society, the implications for brain science, and the implications for understanding of DV-CTE. So I went ahead and we donated my mother's brain after she passed away in 2015. And it was not an easy journey, and forgive me, this is ultimately a very personal story. So some of my emotions sometimes surface because it has been a difficult journey for me. to get answers. I never thought I would be doing, seeking for institutions to get conclusive results of my mother's neuropathology exams. So I just wanted to highlight how difficult it is to really get clear answers about what happens to our brains. And it just highlights the importance of how much work we have ahead of us. And I hope that with this webinar that you're all inspired to do a little bit of whatever you can within your field and with your organization. So it took me 3.5 years to do this. I went to, the first one was UCLA, which is right down the street from me. I'm based here, you know, in LA. Then my mother's brain, some of her brain went to Queen Elizabeth University Hospital at Glasgow. It also went to Banner's Sun Health Research Institute, which is in Arizona. And the results were inconclusive. So I consulted with Dr. David Dodick, who is a friend of mine. He is just very dear to my family. He's the reason why I did the documentary. And he advised, basically said, Maria, if you want to get conclusive results, we're going to have to seek a fourth opinion. And he said, if you don't want to do it anymore, I understand this is really hard on a family to be going through this, but he recommended that we go to Dr. Ann McKee. And just, I want to give you a little bit of background of who Dr. Ann McKee is. She's an amazing, amazing woman. She's the director at Boston University School of Medicine for CTE Center and the Unite Brain Bank. The Unite Brain Bank is the largest repository of brain tissue in the world. She is chief neuropathologist, and she also works for the Veterans Affairs Boston Healthcare System. So she's looked at brains, not just from contact sports and some of the more illustrious NFL players that you hear about on TV, but she does also the military neuropathology exams. She is considered the world's leader in brain trauma and CTE, and was named by Times Magazine as the 50 most influential people in healthcare. She has examined over 1,000 brains of military, contact sports, and other individuals. So I realize the types of resources that I have, and very, very fortunate that my mother's brain was finally taken to her. So I was very confident that whatever she found, this is what it was going to be. Again, she's just an amazing person. And if you want to get information about CTE, I would recommend that you go to her. So after 3.5 years, this is what Dr. Ann McKee shared with me. Alzheimer's and CTE were both very severe by the time of death. And then compounding that is just this incredible loss of nerve cells and white matter fibers, the likes of which I have never seen in CTE or in Alzheimer's disease. And she then told me, I don't know how your mom was functioning. So this is coming from the leader, basically saying, I've never seen a case like this. And as you could tell, I'm still having a really hard time processing that. So forgive me, it just gets emotional when I read this because it's my mother at the end of the day. So let's go on to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about my father, because I believe my father also had CTE, and I spoke about him in the first webinar. He also had a history of suffering traumatic brain injury as a child for many years at the hands of his father. So I inherited domestic violence from my father's side. My mother's family was very loving. But my father, in the many discussions I had with him, because I was never fearful of him, and I wanted him to stop. So many discussions with him about how can we help you, Dad? So my father had these uncontrollable rages that he would talk to me about. I was very worried. So remember, we talked about the symptoms of the stages of pathology in CT, and one of them is the uncontrollable behavior, like the rages that come on. He had memory loss, he had anxiety, mood swings, and inability to focus and others. My father passed away before my mother passed away in a tragic accident. I didn't have the authority to donate his brain, but had I had the authority to do it, I would have donated his brain because I believe my father had CTE, and if you have CTE, it means that you've had traumatic brain injury, and that impacted a lot of what was going on in the cycles of episodes of domestic violence that we had in my family. So lots of opportunities for us to really look more into this. So let's talk a little bit about treatments. Currently, there are no treatments available to slow down or treat CTE. The treatments that are available is to really treat the symptoms, and a lot of the symptoms that we reviewed previously. So again, alleviating symptoms, that's the name of the game right now. That's why it's so important to screen. Rehabilitation, usually you're going to need long-term care, psychiatric counseling, antidepressant, antipsychotic medication, pain medications, alternative therapies like acupuncture, biofeedback, massages, speech therapy, memory exercises, and others. So again, that's why it's so important to screen for this, right? Just screening becomes really, really critical. And again, what I believe that the behavioral health field has a great opportunity to look at these issues. So chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and what is the current focus of research right now? Research are currently trying to develop diagnostic biomarkers for CTE. There's a big study going on with Anne's team right now, just millions that they got from the NIH to look specifically at biomarkers. None have been validated yet. There is no way to detect CTE while you're alive. And then there's lots of focus, and this is where that head acceleration event comes out, term comes out of. How many head impacts begin the long-term progression of CTE? So if you see the NFL players with these helmets, and by the way, helmets don't protect the brain, they protect the skull from severe brain injury, but it doesn't protect your brain. But the helmets that you see some of the professional football players, if you watch football, they have lots of sensors. And so they were trying to detect, can we detect symptoms and can we detect acceleration? Will that tell us what type of, head trauma begins this sequelae of CTE? It's just not there. The science, I don't think the science is there to really look at this issue, but how can we begin evaluating potential treatments and therapies to help people who are suffering from symptoms of CTE? How do we include the DV-CT population? For me, it's very highly critical. CTE can only be diagnosed post-mortem at this time, but scientists are trying, and I share with you, working really hard to diagnose it in living people. Boston University Research CT Center is the first one to focus on the domestic violence and CTE population. So I'm very, very happy of their focus, and largely due to my mother's case that they discovered. So we have now an opportunity to do a Q&A, and I thank you all for listening to the story and giving me a little space, as the emotions are very, as you can tell, still there for my mother and what's happened in my family's life. So I appreciate giving me a little bit of a space for that. I want to make sure we open it up for questions. Any comments? Something that it wasn't clear, please feel free to ask.
Oh, Dr. Roslin asked, did they treat your mom with any medication that was related to dementia?
They diagnosed her with Alzheimer's, so they got her, she was diagnosed with moderate to severe Alzheimer's. By the time I was able to get her to take care, and they gave her medication to just slow down the progression of the symptoms. But at that point, there was really nothing. Once you begin and you've been diagnosed with any progressive neurodegenerative diseases at this point, except for Alzheimer's, there's a current medication that's seems very promising. Nothing really stops it. It just slows down the symptomatology. And so, yeah, they gave her some medication.
All right. And Alex asked, thank you for your vulnerability on sharing your mom's story, Dr. Maria. I'm still thinking of questions at the moment, so he's still
Thank you,
thinking of
Alex.
more questions.
Thank you. I appreciate the supportive words and kind words. Thank you.
Dr. Roslin asks again, do you recommend telling clients the risk of CTE for those who are involved in domestic violence, and what would be the motivation to do so or not?
I think that every individual has a right to get the most current scientific or social science information available. And they're the ones that then make the decision of what to do with that information. So, as a social worker, my ethics is that you need to give information and then help the person that you're serving to then see what they want to do with that. So absolutely, I would absolutely recommend that you educate the population that you're serving about the risk of head trauma. So if they're experiencing repetitive head trauma during domestic violence episodes, that they have a risk not only of traumatic brain injury, because we discussed in the first webinar the symptomatologies that's there, but then that they have a risk for progressive neurodegenerative diseases and CTE. Absolutely, I would recommend that, because for my mom's case and some of the individuals that I've seen, is that you're living a life not understanding why you're not able to function, why you're not able to keep a job, why you're not able to do the things that you were able to do before. And you're going to the doctor, and the doctors in the medical field are not trained on this, and they're not diagnosing you properly. So you're left literally in the darkness of what's happening to me. So I think, Dr. Roslin, I think you have so much that you can provide clarity to this individual who might be just really lost, and then guide them to perhaps where they can get a little bit of clarity, get hopefully some screening for traumatic brain injury, and get more informed about progressive neurodegenerative diseases, and know they're right, they're experiencing the symptoms, and perhaps they can begin to get some treatment to alleviate those symptoms so they can function better in life. They might start showing up to appointments now. They might make it through, I'm going to go to a shelter, and now I know that I can really complete the intake. I can do all these things. Remember, the symptoms are the ones that really implicate your ability to function, like light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, migraines, right? And so they're at a loss, like my mother. We were at a loss as to what was happening. So I would advocate absolutely. Information is power. But I think, Dr. Roslin, with your point is, the way you're going to relay it is hopefully also, then this is what you can do and help them advocate for themselves. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Alex followed up with, on the question of screening for TBI, do you know of any good screening tools online?
No, not online, and I know of some screening tools, but they all have lots of challenges with them. So I think if you find one that you like, I would recommend that you talk to your organization or behavioral health in this case, obviously, and look at how you can modify it to really meet the needs that you have. But we're gonna do this in I'm set to go to Washington, where we're looking at how do we address the domestic violence epidemic in that statewide, where we want to screen the entire population at risk for DV. So we're developing a screening tool that could be used for children, youth, women, and men. But I don't know of one that I would recommend. It's not online.
Oh, I believe it was sent accidentally as a direct message, but Dr. Roslyn commented, thank you for your bravery and sharing your story with us as we learn how to support our community. This is important work.
Oh, thank you. It's my honor. I appreciate your kind words.
Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put in chat, or if there's anything that Dr. Maria discussed earlier that you wanted more details on, feel free to let us know as well.
I just I just saw Dr. Ralston. Are you able to share your contact with me as I have a treatment and interpretation? Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything that I could do to support, collaborate. As you know, this is a mission for me. I am doing everything within my power to get information out, because I think we have a horrific epidemic that is just silently, especially the domestic violence population, which tends to be so isolated and alienated, and is specifically for me, in my mother's case, an immigrant woman, which really implicated her ability to get services. So anything that I could do, please know that I'm completely available and happy to collaborate or partner in any way that I can. Do you recommend any online resource or websites on this topic that can be shared with families or providers? I have Pamphila. So pamphila.org is my mother's name. And we have information about why this issue is important, obviously with my mother's story. We are affiliated with Boston University's CTE Center. I'm working with them right now. When I mean working, I'm collaborating with them. They're putting up a webpage specifically for the domestic violence population that in CTE. So we're linked to them if they want information about how to do brain donation. Brain donation goes through Boston University. And by the way, brain donation and getting a neuropathology exam is extremely expensive, very expensive. They are able to pay for it. So you can go to our website, and then our website also lists the handful, literally handful, not even, I think 4 in the country, organizations that are devoted to domestic violence and traumatic brain injury. So they're listed there, and we list other things that are there. But yeah, absolutely, feel free to refer them to pamphila.org. Pamphila is P-A-N, sorry, I'm looking, PANFILA.org. PANFILA.org. And thank you all thank you, Max. Thank you. You're so wonderful. Max has been wonderful, supportive, and just great. Thank you, Max. I want to thank everybody for listening to this story, for giving me some time and the space to talk about this. But more important, thank you for listening. And just by the questions, I'm hoping that you are motivated to do whatever you can within your organization to start looking at this issue. Just thank you for doing that and for really caring about this issue. It is, I think, it's urgent that we address it. So thank you profusely for being part of the webinar and listening in. I hope that if you didn't listen to the first one, you have an opportunity to just take a listen. And I hope that you're able to join us for the final one, which is next in 2 Wednesdays, right, Max? 2 Wednesday, not next Wednesday, but 2 Wednesdays. Any other questions? Max, you can answer that
Yes,
one.
Alex. We are in the process of making the previous recordings to have it available soon. We're just in the works of adding closed captioning and all that stuff, and we will have it available soon. I just don't have a timeline yet.
Thank you, Dr. Larslan. So happy to have you. Alex, everybody, thank you so much.